Hi, everyone. Welcome to our next session. So today we've got fiber, microbiome, and immune health with Dr. Katrine Whiteson. I'm Chef Jess, and we are here at the newly designated Musalam Nutrition Education Center. So we had the honor of designating this space last week. And so now we are officially open. And so you'll get to see me in action in the kitchen. And I'm going to hand it over to Katrina right now so that she can teach us a little bit more about fiber and the microbiome.
Thank you very much. I'm really glad to be here. And I'm here right next door, next to the kitchen here at the Samueli Center for Integrative Health. And so we've been having the series. Today's session will be about fiber and immune health. And we're going to get to hear Jess, and we're going to get to see Jess prepare some high fiber foods. I'm really looking forward to that. And she's leaning into the seeds and the beans and the lentils, which is a really smart way to get a lot of fiber. And I'm going to start out with some of the science background before we get into the cooking. So I'm Katrine Whiteson. I'm a professor here at UC Irvine, and my lab focuses on the microbiome. So when I say microbiome, I'm talking about collections of bacteria, viruses, fungi, and other microbes that live in a specific environment. And in the last 15 years or so, especially, we've just generated huge amounts of data telling us all about how the microbiome, especially in the gut, is correlated with obesity, cancer, autoimmune disease, even brain chemistry, and vaccine efficacy. And in an earlier session, we talked about microbiomes across the lifespan, and that video is available on our session. Today, I'm going to talk about what we can do about it. So what is the big challenge in the next 10 years is to figure out how to engineer our microbiomes. So what can we do to improve our health and promote healthy microbiomes in our guts, which then therefore go on to promote healthy immunity? So what are our options when it comes to engineering the microbiome? Well, there's probiotics, the $60 billion industry, which sells us live microbes. And also fermented foods would be in that category. And then there's prebiotics like fiber. So those are microbial accessible nutrients, foods that have complex carbohydrates that are hard for our human digestion to break down quickly. And therefore we rely on our microbes to help us. Other options for engineering the microbiome include fecal transplants, which have become more common to treat a specific antibiotic-associated gut infection, C. diff, and also phage therapy, bacterial viruses that can target the bacterial pathogens that antibiotics are not able to treat. And those are all topics of research in my lab, but are beyond the scope of today's lecture, but I welcome questions. So just to give you a sneak peek, here's a summary showing you how we've been doing undergraduate interventions where we have the students in our classes here at UC Irvine eat a really high fiber diet for 2 weeks, and we take fecal samples from before and after to study their microbiomes. And you can see a couple of our publications here. We've been publishing both science-focused and education-focused manuscripts. And here's an image of one of my graduate students. He now has his PhD, actually. And he was acting as the teaching assistant, but even almost more like a camp counselor for this group of students as we ate really high fiber diets, 40 or 50 grams a day for 2 weeks. And he coached everyone to drink enough water. And we really had a lot of fun. And I'm actually going to do this again in the winter quarter, and I'm really looking forward to it. Okay, so before I get too much farther, I want to define fiber. So what is fiber? A more biochemical definition is that fibers are carbohydrate polymers with 10 or more units of sugars that are all linked together, and they're linked in a way that our human enzymes cannot break them down. So that means they stick in our digestive tract and persist down to the large intestine where most of our microbes live. Where can you find fiber? Well, fiber is how plants are storing their energy and creating structure for plants. So where can you find them? You can find them in all different plant-based foods. So vegetables, fruits, beans, whole grains, nuts and seeds are all having fiber. You don't find fiber in animal products or meat. And you don't also find fiber in a lot of processed foods. So a lot of food processing essentially is removing the fiber, which turns out to be really important for our health and has had a devastating impact on chronic lifestyle disease in the industrialized world. So here's another way to look at what fiber is. So fibers are these carbohydrates that are only found in plant-based foods, and they provide a lot of different health benefits. They provide better digestive health. They can help you achieve a healthy weight, reducing the risk of chronic diseases, including heart attacks and strokes, type 2 diabetes, high cholesterol, and obesity. And it's because one of the reasons is that it's because fiber helps us keep our blood sugar levels stable by slowing down the absorption of sugar, so you don't have sugar spikes after you eat. In the US, we have a really dramatic gap in the fiber that we're eating on a regular basis. So an average person in the US is getting less than half of what's recommended in terms of our fiber intake. So it's something we really need to work on. And it's interesting, like, I don't feel like I hear about it as much. You hear a lot about making sure you get enough protein, which we're doing a pretty good job of in the US, but fiber across pretty much every group, we are not getting enough. And so our bodies cannot directly digest fiber. Unlike other carbs, fiber passes through the body undigested without really turning it into sugar. But our gut microbes have the necessary enzymes to digest fiber and turn it into beneficial compounds. Some of the most beneficial compounds that fibers produce are known as short-chain fatty acids. And they are some of the favorite molecules to feed the cells that line our intestines. And I'm going to talk about it more. Here's an article I really appreciated recently in the New York Times talking about how we aren't really getting enough fiber. And it's full of solutions and discusses the pros and cons of getting fiber from foods and supplements, which is a really common question that I get. And I guess my big answer is just that whatever you need to do to get more fiber, I would go for it. It's very likely to be beneficial. But here are 12 fiber-filled foods just to get us started. And I think it's really fascinating to learn how much fiber there is in different foods. So a cup of broccoli has 5 grams. You'll notice that salad is not really on this list. I mean, you can eat a lot of salad, but not really end up getting all that much fiber. But chia seeds, for example, just 1 tablespoon already has 4 grams of fiber. That's a lot. Beans and lentils and other legumes are incredibly high in fiber. So with a half a cup of cooked black beans here, it's listed as 7.5 grams of fiber. So if you ate a cup of black beans a day, you could fill your gap. And then there's some other really fascinating examples on here, like berries. They're so sweet, but they have a lot of fiber. Look at that. A cup of raspberries has 8 grams of fiber. And also avocados. I've always known that avocados are high in healthy fats, but it turns out they're also high in fiber. So a half of an avocado gets you 5 grams of fiber. So really, you've got to, I mean, in my mind, if you are looking to increase your fiber intake, you've got to pick a couple of meals where you could add something like this consistently in a way that feels doable to you. For me, adding chia seeds to my yogurt is doable. Making sure that we cook beans regularly, that feels doable. If it feels expensive, then I want to just point out that frozen berries are a really good deal, and they really do capture the nutrients that you need. And frozen vegetables and fruits in general are a really good source of nutrients. So here, berries, I just think this is fascinating. This is a picture from Trader Joe's this week, and you'll see that blueberries and raspberries are a really good deal. And then beans are an amazing deal. Look at this. You can get yourself, enough beans to feed your family for less than $2 in both of these examples of black beans and Mayakoba beans. And here's some fun examples of fibers. Here's a graduate student who I've followed for years who does really cool research about how fiber impacts our microbiomes. And he's talking about which fiber personality you might be, but here's some more just examples of foods that are high in fiber. He's got a whole website with recipes that I'm sharing with you here. And a big conclusion of his research, where he compared different types of fiber supplements, was that it didn't really matter which fiber you chose. Any kind of fiber you add to your diet is going to have a lot of benefit. And he found that people who started out with lower fiber intake benefited the most and really had positive impacts on their microbiome composition and function from eating fiber. So what does this look like through our digestive tracts? I've been telling you guys about how, if you eat fiber, it will persist in your digestive tract. So here's a comparison of white rice and lentils. And you'll see that if you eat white rice, it's digested quickly. Here's an image of our digestive tract depicted as this arrow. And you'll notice that most of our microbes are living down here in our colon, which is a very anaerobic or non-oxygen tolerant environment. And so when you eat white rice, you're not really getting any substance down to your colon where the microbes are. Whereas if you eat something higher fiber, like lentils, those fibers will persist and give the bacteria that live in your colon something to eat. And so what are the consequences? Well, I mentioned that you'll avoid blood sugar spikes, and that's because you end up with this slower absorption of nutrients. But from a microbial perspective, the microbes are able to use those molecules in the fiber, and they have specialized enzymes for chopping them into smaller bits. And some of those fermentation products are short chain fatty acids like acetate, propionate, butyrate, and valerate. They're really volatile molecules. They don't smell very good, but they turn out to be really important favorite fuels of the cells lining the epithelia in our gut. And so they have these really amazing and important consequences on our immune health, keeping the lining of our gut strong, helping to promote immune homeostasis. There's all kinds of measures that people have used to measure the immune impact of fiber, including increases in antimicrobial peptides that can help keep our microbiome in check. In another view, here I'm showing you dietary fiber being broken down by the gut microbes into the short chain fatty acids, as we described. And then here's a depiction of the cells lining the intestine, the gut lumen. And so if you are fueling these microbes, you usually have a much thicker, healthier mucus layer and tighter junctions between the cells lining your intestine. So these will protect you so that the contents of your gut are not spilling into your blood. And then here's some of the impacts that includes. So we talked about decreases in glucose spikes, obesity, and heart disease, and also increases in nutrient absorption, beneficial metabolites, immune responses, and gut barrier integrity. And I'll give you a few more examples of that through the lecture. I also want you guys to have a chance to examine nutrition labels from the perspective of fiber. So there's something pretty interesting you can figure out about your food when you look at a nutrition label. So here's white bread. That tells you that the flour has been processed. And you'll see out of the 23 grams of carbs in this slice of bread, only 1 gram is in the form of fiber, which is less than the wheat grain started out having. It should be that you're getting a third or so of the fiber, of the carbohydrates in the form of fiber. Here for whole wheat bread, you see there's 19 grams of carbs and 4 of them are in the form of fiber. So this is closer to the starting point of how much fiber the wheat had in it before food processing. And if you're dosing insulin, you can actually subtract the fiber from the total carbs. So you need less insulin when you eat foods that have fiber in them. Here's a couple more examples. Here's some lentils. You'll see out of the 22 grams of carbs in this bag, 11 of them are fiber. So half of the carbohydrates are in the form of fiber. And that's true for a lot of beans and lentils. So they just are really a wonderful source of fiber. Here's black beans again, and you can see out of the 20 grams of carbs in this package, 8.3 grams of them are fiber. And so that's just a really good source. Another interesting tip is that if you cook pasta or rice or potatoes, actually, cooking and then cooling them back down will cause the food starch molecules to become tightly packed together and make them more difficult to digest. So you're essentially increasing the fiber content if you cool down cooked starches, especially starches that have a lot of potential for forming resistant starch. Potatoes are even better at this than pasta and rice, actually. But this even showed up in the New York Times recently, and I thought it'd be fun to share that with you guys if you're looking to get more fiber into your diet or looking to avoid blood sugar spikes. Another really interesting trick that really we don't understand why it works is that if you eat acid like lemon or vinegar, for some people it's variable, This actually decreases blood sugar spikes from eating starchy foods. And one hypothesis is that it inhibits the enzymes in our saliva, the amylase that can break down starches. So it slows down the sugar absorption from the food that we're eating. But to be honest, this is like, it's interesting. We don't understand why it works, and it's not consistent across all people, but it's just a trick to be aware of for decreasing blood sugar spikes from eating carbohydrates. And then I just want to point out some of the ways you might want to know about preparing beans. Some people believe that changing the soaking water will help alleviate the gas problem for which beans are famous. But some people believe you throw out some of the vitamins and goodness when you do that. There's an herb that's used widely in Mexican cooking, epazote, which is thought to help. But research makes no definitive conclusions. I love that even the Rancho Gordo Bean Company brings up this fact that we don't really have evidence one way or the other. So you just kind of have to figure out what works for you. And their conclusion, of course, is that the best way to help with the gas is just to eat more beans. That's a bit of a simple answer. And of course, there's people with food intolerances that really have to figure that out. But anyhow, here's a few tips that might help you if you're wanting to prepare dried beans. Another interesting thing you can do with beans and lentils is that you can sprout them. And that's another way to reduce the simple sugar content. And so here's some Rancho Gordo beans that I sprouted, and it's actually quite fun to see what the little seedlings look like coming from each bean type. And then you can chop them up and put them in salad. Another impact of fiber is that it helps you feel full. And here's a NPR article that I really enjoyed where they describe how fiber containing foods boost levels of an Ozempic-like hormone. So some of the benefits that people are getting from these new type 2 diabetes drugs like Ozempic can be attained from eating more fiber. You can also help to avoid infection by eating fiber. So here's a couple of studies showing how cultivating your microbiome with fiber-rich foods could help you avoid infection. Even in the context of the ICU in the hospital, a moment when people's health is really on the line could really be helped by having dietary fiber to protect from the impact of antibiotics and help prevent infection. I mentioned vaccine efficacy, and this is a study that's ongoing, so I can't share the results yet, but this is an enormous study at the MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston, led by Jen Wargo, where they're testing the impact of fiber on vaccine efficacy in a lot of the employees at MD Anderson. So I'm really looking forward to the results of this study. And here's a result that had a huge impact on my thinking, also from the MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston, where they show that people who were eating more than 20 grams of fiber a day had much more successful cancer treatment outcomes for immunotherapy. So specifically, this cohort were people with melanoma who were receiving immunotherapy, which is typically only effective in about a third of the people who get it. But they found that of the people in their study, if they were eating more than 20 grams of fiber a day, their treatment outcomes basically doubled. And so I think that's fascinating. It could also mean that the people eating more fiber started out healthier and wealthier. And so this is something that I think needs to be studied more. But I think it's just a good thing to know that fiber can help your cancer treatment outcomes. This is the study that inspired our culinary intervention in the undergraduate classes. So I want to share this one with you. Here, they asked people from South Africa, from rural South Africa, to swap diets with people in Pittsburgh in the United States. And so just for 2 weeks, they had them swap diets. And in those 2 weeks, the people in South Africa got to eat barbecue chicken, and the people in Pittsburgh ate a lot more plants and got almost 60 or 70 grams of fiber a day. It was a very high fiber intervention. And they found in just 2 weeks that eating the higher fiber diet led to clinically meaningful decreases in inflammation and even markers of cancer risk. They were doing colonoscopies and looking at little precancerous cell growths. And they found the opposite to be true in the South African cohort who got to eat the American diet. And so, what were those diets like? So the South Africans, without even trying, were eating something like 66 grams of fiber per day, whereas the African American cohort in Pittsburgh were eating something like 14 grams a day. And there were also big differences in the fat contents of the diets. A big citizen science project called the American Gut Project has really interesting data about food diversity associating with gut microbial diversity. And they have more than 10,000 people in their study. And they found that they only had good diet data for about 1,000 of them, but they found that something like 42 of the people in that 1,000-person cohort were eating more than 30 types of plants in a week, and that those people had higher gut microbial community diversity, which is also associated with better immune health. And so I thought that was really interesting. I actually have personally tried surveying the amount of plants that I'm eating in a week, and I find that I am getting up to like more than 40 different kinds of plants in a week. But of course, each salad has a lot of different kinds of things in it. And I counted coffee and tea and hops for beer and stuff like that. Another way that can really help us increase our gut microbial diversity is eating fermented foods. And we're going to have a whole session on fermented foods, actually. But if you compare increasing fiber with increasing fiber and adding fermented foods across people in this study, where you can see the weeks of the study along the x-axis and the number of different kinds of microbes in each person's gut across the y-axis. And you'll see that more consistently across people, when you add the fermented foods, you increase gut microbial diversity. And we know that it's not because of the microbes in the fermented foods, it's actually from the molecules in the fermented foods promoting the diversity of microbes that are already there, or maybe gut microbes that you're exposed to in the environment or the people around you. So I want to share a little bit about what happened in our class intervention. We wanted to ask the question, how does a wholesome diet high in fiber change the gut microbiome and influence the abundance of short-chain fatty acids in the intestine? So we had this cohort of students, brave souls, 26 of them, who began our experiment to eat 50 grams of fiber a day. We kept track of everyone's diet and took 3 baseline fecal samples in the first week of the class. And then we did this 2-week fiber intervention, taking 3 more samples at the end. So the first question is just, well, did we succeed? Did they increase their fiber intake? And yes, they really did. You can see we started out with some students literally getting 0 grams of fiber a day, and the average around what the US diet typically consists of, less than 20 grams a day. But in weeks 2 and 3 of the study, they increased their fiber intake to above 40 and 50 grams a day, as we had hoped. And it, of course, required drinking enough water and so forth. And so how did we do it? Well, we used the meal prep company called Thistle. I looked at the fiber content of a bunch of different meal prep companies here in Southern California, and it turned out that typical Thistle meals had 15 to 20 grams of fiber per meal. So they got 2 meals from Thistle per day. And then we asked them to try to eat other high fiber foods for their other meals. And we surveyed them. We gave them lots of information, and this is their survey response. So the numbers down here tell you how many students reported back that they ate these foods. And you'll see seeds like chia seeds we mentioned were definitely being consumed. Some people were using high fiber breads or even fiber bars and fiber cookies and cereal. So this is more like using a supplement. And those were part of how people succeeded in getting more fiber. Broccoli was up there. Berries, as we mentioned, are so sweet, but have a low glycemic index and lots of fiber. Avocado, as I also mentioned, surprised me that I learned that it has a lot of fiber in it too. So this was really fun to see what advice the students took to heart and actually tried out. And I think every student in that class will really remember it and never look at a nutrition label the same way. From a microbiome perspective, we took all those fecal samples, extracted their DNA, and assessed the different types of microbes that were present. So each of the columns on this chart represent a different fecal sample, and the samples from the same person are clustered and numbered together like this, where it says individual. And each color in this chart represents a different kind of bacteria. The biggest signal you can see, from the back of the room is that there are very strong individual signals. And that's something we know from all microbiome studies, that each person is quite individual and that the microbiomes we develop early in our lives tend to stick with us through our lives. I guess one thing I'll say about that is that longer term dietary changes can have big impact on our microbiome composition. And this was just a little 2-week study, so we weren't expecting to change things dramatically. But we did see some really interesting changes that were associated with the dietary intervention. So the high fiber diet accounted for about 8% of the microbiome variability within an individual, and the samples in the second group of these 6 for each person are after the intervention. And you can see some people, here's individual number 1, this bright blue bifidobacterium really expands when they are eating the high fiber diet. And actually that's an example, bifido, of a bug that you can see expanding in many of the people in the study. And so we assessed which bacteria were changing due to the dietary intervention. And actually bifidobacteria was the most significantly associated with the increase in fiber. And bifidos are famous for their capacity to break down complex fibers. They carry a lot of these enzymes that humans don't make for breaking down the linkages in fibers. We also found that diversity decreased on a high fiber diet. And to be honest, our expectation was that the diversity would go up, that we were providing all these nutrients for the microbiome and that would quickly lead to an expansion in the diversity. But I think it was too quick, those 2 weeks. And so we've now done other meta-analyses. A student in another ecology and evolution lab, Jen Martini's lab here at UCI, her student Cynthia did an amazing meta-analysis of a bunch of different dietary interventions and found that this was a very consistent trend. Most interventions are short because that's what's easy to fund and get done. And most people found this result, that the diversity goes down in the short term. So I think we need longer term studies to learn about this. But just to summarize our studies, we found that the high fiber diet significantly shifted the microbiome in those 2 weeks, especially towards bifidobacteria, which can break down fiber. And we've published both science and education focused manuscripts about the study. I'm happy to announce that we got funding from the Samueli Integrative Health Institute to do another fiber intervention in a breast cancer survivor cohort. And that's going to happen this spring. And feel free to contact me if you're interested. I don't have anything announced yet, but I'm looking forward. And I just want to point out that it was very interesting to me. I consulted the Oracle. I asked ChatGPT here, how should we help people eat more fiber? And I thought the suggestions were actually really good. Of course, eating more fruits and vegetables and whole grains, snacking on nuts and seeds, beans, of course, came up, choosing high fiber snacks, and pragmatically using fiber supplements. If you're not managing to get the fiber from your diet, you really may benefit from taking a fiber supplement. So figuring out what works for you, I think, is what matters. And then I want to point out this really interesting organization, Beans is How, where they talk about how beans are not only having all these health properties we've discussed today, but actually they are affordable and they also are something that the climate can handle. It's much easier to feed our population with plants than it is to feed with meat. And in the United States, I think the average American is getting about 2/3 of their protein from meat-related products. And if we could switch that towards plant-based products, and I don't mean processed food so much, but whole food plant products, they are very high in protein too. So we've talked a lot about beans being high in fiber, but they also have a lot of protein. Which brings me to my final point. I love this quote from John Steinbeck: "Beans are a roof over your stomach." And when John Steinbeck wrote this in Tortilla Flat, he was thinking about surviving the winter and avoiding starvation. And he talked about how families would go out to the fields and gather the beans that had been left behind after the harvest had already been taken. And their goal was to have 400 pounds of beans in the house to make it through the winter. But in our era, where our problems are more these chronic health issues and type 2 diabetes and inflammatory bowel syndrome, and of course, eating beans might take some figuring out to figure out how to tolerate them. But, you know, if I were somebody who was about to undergo cancer treatment or had to take antibiotics and I was looking to protect my microbiome and my immune health, I think beans would be a really good addition. Okay, so with that, I have my 5 key takeaways. You guys can read, and these are available on the website. I'd like to acknowledge my lab and my funding sources, which have made all of this fun work possible. I'll highlight the seminars that are coming up, and this is all also available, including the recordings on the website. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Chef Jess, who is going to show us how to make some really tasty high fiber recipes.
All right. Hold on one sec. Oh, Katrina, I'm going to have you stop sharing.
Good idea. Sorry about that.
All right. Can everyone see?
Yeah, it looks great. We can see the
Perfect.
cooking
Okay.
setup.
Nice. Okay. So we are going to actually make 3 things today, or we're going to try to make 3 things today. We are going to make a black bean cookie. So for the black bean cookie, if you know anything about what we try to do in here, we try to add beans into a lot of things. And one of the things that we try to do is desserts. So some of you might have seen like the black bean brownie. This is pretty much the same thing. There's just so many things out there that we can incorporate into our dessert that you wouldn't naturally think would be sweet, but they're great for it. White beans are another one that's great, but black beans mixed with a little bit of cocoa powder seems to trick us into thinking we're eating something like a brownie or a chocolate cookie. So this is what we're going to do. We are going to take black beans, and you've heard me say an Instant Pot is all you need. An Instant Pot made a product so well they had to file bankruptcy because nobody else needs another Instant Pot. So it's pretty sad, but you can make a pot of beans and and then freeze them for 6 to 8 months. You can also pre-soak beans and freeze them. So if you're somebody who likes to soak and then cook them, you can do that. Just pre-soak them, then freeze them pre-soak, or cook them all the way and then use them as you need. Now, why do I say that? You can control the amount of salt then when you're making your own beans. And it helps when you're trying to make a dessert out of beans. And so if you just keep your beans neutral, you can do a lot of different things with them, including adding them, pureeing them into things that you would normally not see beans in, like a chocolate cookie. So I'm going to add beans in. And then I also have maple syrup. And I want you to just see that when I add the maple syrup, it's very thin, right? And that means it's the good stuff. It's not the fake stuff. It's real maple syrup. And that means you are paying for it too. And then we've got baking powder and a little bit of salt, because that is a little bit of maple syrup. We want to cut the cook. And then we've got nut butters, more fiber. So when you're buying nut butters, you always get a choice of creamy or crunchy. The crunchy one will give you that little extra bit of fiber. And so if you're just wondering, it does. That little extra bit does happen. And I'm actually using a mix of sunflower butter and almond butter. So the seeds. So if you think about it, all these seeds and nuts have so much fat in them that they end up being really creamy. And they can trick us into thinking that we're eating something fat or creamy. Cocoa powder. Now this is the part where a lot of people will ask questions. Really cool is cocoa powder actually contains fiber because cocoa is made from cacao nibs. So you'll hear 2 things, cocoa powder and cacao. What is the difference? Cocoa powder is the Hershey's stuff. When we bake, I have to advise you to use it. Now, why is that? Cacao powder is made, so the cacao, the one that's expensive that you see out there in the store, like health food stores and things like that, it is fermented but it's cooked at a very, very low temperature. So it's preserving that fermentation. Cocoa powder is made the same way. It's fermented, but then they use high heat to roast it. What that does is it eliminates that bitterness that cocoa has. So if you're baking something and you use cacao, the expensive stuff, what ends up happening is you actually enhance the bitterness and it dries out your baked goods. So if you're baking with it and you're going to heat it up, don't use the cacao stuff because you're going to lose all the benefits of it anyways when you heat it up at that high of a temperature. Go back to your cocoa powder and just realize that you are still getting a little bit of fiber in there too. So if you want like a nicer, you can buy all natural cocoa powders, but just realize don't buy the cacaos or like the dark chocolates because they do tend to dry things out. And it's just a different process that it would make. It's the same thing about sour cream and yogurt, but yogurt is that much better. We just like pasteurizing things here. We like heating things up very, very hot. So I put everything in a blender or a food processor, and I'm just gonna let it go. And it's just gonna create this batter, nice batter for us. If you feel like it's a little too loose for you, you're more than welcome to put it in the refrigerator. Because one thing that cocoa does is it slowly absorbs the liquid. And so if you want, you can wait a little bit and then it'll thicken up a little bit. I think this looks good just the way it is. Whoop. They're not going to move much, but you don't have to worry about them being too close together. And what about those chocolate chips? I see they will add the chocolate chips. You can even add nuts in here. And if you're using a crunchy nut butter to make it, you've got extra nuts in there to begin with. And then I'm actually going to throw in only half of my chocolate chips, not all of them. Because if you've ever made something like this before, you lose them inside. And when you eat it, it's great. But for appearance reasons, it's always pretty to be able to see the chocolate chips. So I like to leave a couple out so that I can actually just push them in. I have a cookie sheet here. And they bake pretty quick, about 8 to 10 minutes. Now think about what we actually put in there. There's absolutely nothing in there that you could not eat raw. So you can eat pretty much all of it raw. But you want about 10 cookies. You can roll them out. You can just flatten them out. I like just flattening them out because then I can add more of the chocolate chips right on top. If you look at it, it looks just like a chocolate cookie. There's nothing that's black, reminding you of a black bean. Maybe you can smell it. You would say the same. Two, four, six, 8, 7. You can take the back of a measuring cup and just gently push down. Just like that. And if you get it wet, you can do it even more. You just got a question. Oh, I did. About cocoa, C-O-C-O, is cacao. Okay, so cocoa versus cacao. So those are the two different things. That's exactly what I was talking about. Is that one is fermented and heated at a high temperature versus the other one that is not heated at a high temperature. So one is a high temperature heat, which kills all the good stuff done. So which one is good for baking? Cocoa. Okay. I wouldn't use cacao. It tastes weird to use cacao powder sometimes, just because it makes it all bitter. It enhances that bitterness. If you like nuts, you could even put some nuts on top of that. I'm gonna stick that in the oven. That's good. Okay. Let's move on over here. Let's see. I'm going to, perfect. Okay, so Trina's here. So if you have questions, shout them out. Or she can't, yeah, just shout them out. Okay, so now we're gonna make hummus. Hummus is probably one of the easiest things to do. And what I did for you today instead was I created a formula. So the reason why I like formulas is because not everybody has everything ready to go usually at home. And so I have garbanzo beans. Okay. So you can use any kind of bean you have at home. I have garbanzo beans. And garbanzo beans, if you haven't heard me say, is the one bean that I actually keep the liquid for, because this is aquafaba, and aquafaba is like gold. It can whip up into egg whites. So we can use that for whatever it is that we would want to use in replacement for like an egg white. You can lighten batters up. You can make a souffle sometimes with it. A little bit of salt. We're gonna add a little bit of onion or garlic, so you can choose whichever one you want. A little bit of spices. I have some shawarma spice ready to go. And then a little bit of a sweetener. So you want something sweet. So we have a little bit of maple and then olive oil. And then because this is hummus, I like using tahini, but you can use whatever you want. You can use nut butters again. But tahini is made from sesame seeds. Okay. I think the recipe said not to use Dutch process. Yes, very good. Dutch process is, I say that because when you go to the store, sometimes you'll see Hershey's makes a Dutch process. Dutch process is just a lot stronger. And so it is going to dry out your goods even more. So don't buy the Dutch process unless a recipe calls for Dutch process. Don't buy it.
Which one is heated and can you use a sugar substitute?
No, don't use a sugar substituted one. And the one that is heated is cocoa powder. So the Hershey stuff, all the Hershey stuff is going to be heated. If you go back into one of our past presentations, we did a chocolate truffle, a raw chocolate truffle using raw cacao powder. That recipe, you would be able to preserve all of the cacao, like the benefits of the cacao, because you're not going to heat it up. So if you want, you can dig around for that recipe too. So I'm just going to go ahead and blend this. Yeah, you can definitely replace the syrup with honey. The next best one, date syrup. Does date syrup have fiber in it?
No. Probably not.
No. I'm like looking for the little things that have fiber right now.
I mean, anything closer to real food that's not processed is better. Maybe it's a little closer.
It is, yeah. And that's why, yeah, we'll go into it in a sec. Okay, so now I'm going to turn this on. Oh, it's not on. All these safety precautions. There we go.
I have a question too. I'll go in.
Okay. Dr. Whiteson is going to answer that question right now, too. There we go.
I just got a question about if there are good and bad bacteria in our guts, and if eating fiber, increased the good bacteria. I mean, I don't actually like thinking of the bacteria as good and bad. I mean, even the word pathogen, I think, is too strong a word. Most microbes are not pathogens, and it depends a lot on the context. There are exceptions, like HIV or Ebola is obviously a pathogen. But a lot of the bacteria in our gut, if they're fueled with fiber, are going to have positive health impact. But yes, we did see in our study that there were bacteria that we consider good that increased, like bifidobacteria. But it's so context dependent, it's so strain dependent, like the substrains of bacteria can have really different health impacts. E. coli that kills you from a Chipotle burrito or a contaminated food has almost all of the same genes compared to a completely benign and healthy E. coli that everybody would have in their gut. So it's, you know, the health impact of bacteria turns on a dime. Even just changing one gene out can make a big difference. So yeah, so I don't think of them so starkly as good and bad like that.
It's the same with food. I feel like sometimes we think certain foods are good or certain foods are bad, but at the end of the day, for me, it's just whether or not it's processed. I think that we can find the good of all food for whatever reason. Like we give salt a bad rap, but at the end of the day, if we didn't have salt, we wouldn't be able to preserve a lot of the foods that we love to eat. So they're there for a reason, just don't abuse them, I guess. I'm going to add some lemon juice in here. So you can add any kind of an acid that you want to help thin it out. A lot of people will wonder, why is my hummus not thin? And they'll try to peel each little garbanzo bean even. No, don't go doing that. There's no need for that. Just add more water, or you can add more lemon juice if you like lemon juice. Add a little water. And just to finish it all off, just to make it pretty, I like to add fresh herbs. So I've got a little bit of mint and parsley. You can use basil, cilantro, but really it just brightens it up to add a little bit of fresh herbs. And again, the fiber. Just because Amber left that question up. You can't use Dutch cocoa because Dutch cocoa requires more liquid. So when you cook with Dutch cocoa, it'll actually dry out what it is that you're eating. So there is your hummus ready to go, and you can use veggie chips, dips, things like that. And that's where we're going to go into next, is we're actually going to make a chip or a cracker or something to eat, because we keep telling you to stop eating processed foods. And so you're like, okay, but then what am I supposed to eat if you won't let me eat processed foods? Let's make our own processed foods. Not really, kind of. This is a flaxseed cracker. So flaxseed is one of those things that you can see everywhere you go now. And the problem with flaxseed is they like selling it ground up like this, but this goes rancid really fast. But you're not going to use a whole bag of flaxseed meal unless you're making 30 flaxseed eggs to bake with. I don't know, maybe you add it into your smoothie. This is a great way to use up a lot of leftover flaxseed meal that you have. So all it is literally flaxseed as the base of the cracker. We're going to add a little bit of onion powder. So the onion powder will give it its flavor then. A little bit of garlic powder. Sorry, we prepped these out the day before and put them in the refrigerator. And dry spices do not like the refrigerator. Okay. And then a little bit of salt. And then oat flour. So oat flour, people actually sell now. Like Quaker Oats makes their own oat flour. Don't buy it. Just make your own. There's absolutely no reason why. If you have a bag of oats at home, you put it in a food processor or a mixer of any kind and you make oat flour. There is no real reason to go out and buy it unless you just didn't have oats at home. And the funny thing about it is the oat flour that you buy, that you make at home, probably will contain a little bit more fiber just because you're blending it. You don't have the mill that Quaker Oats is using to make the flour. So that all gets mixed up. Okay. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to add water, half a cup of water. We did this recently with our, I can't remember what, I do group medical patients, and we did this with a group medical class, and they really, really enjoyed it. Now we're going to up the fiber even more. We're going to add some chia seeds and za'atar. Now why za'atar? Za'atar, and it has to be Jordanian za'atar, actually, I've been told. Jordanian za'atar apparently has a little bit more sesame seeds. And so the sesame seeds are there too. and it's got thyme. So za'atar has thyme in it, a little bit of sumac, and then sesame seeds. So it's a Middle Eastern herb blend mix that you can either make on your own, or if you go to like Wholesome Choice down the street, you can find it there. I actually think they sell it at other grocery stores too. You just have to look for it. It's called za'atar, or you can find an easy recipe online for it. So the hardest part about this recipe, I'll be honest, is rolling it out. Because you want to roll it out really, really thin. The thinner, the better, because then you can get this crisp cracker ready to go. So I like just using just the regular rolling pin, and I'm gonna show you what I did, and then I already baked it so you can see what it looks like. But I'll just keep going around. So I'll rotate my cookie sheet around, or my stuff around, and then what'll happen is it'll come off the edge. You'll get some extra, you'll get some extra popping off. Pick that up, pick your sheet back up, and then put it right back on the sides, just like that. You're gonna have to keep going back in and kind of like sealing it, pushing it all together. And again, as thin as possible. So if it squirts out again, you just go back in and line it back up. And keep rolling, okay? You've got this nice thin sheet now ready to go, and peel gently. So just peel gently, and you can score it. I put it into the oven and baked it. And I took it out of the oven, and depending on the color of the flax seeds that you use, it'll be different colors. But now I can go in, and I wish you could hear it, but it cracks, okay? So you've got these beautiful flaxseed crackers ready to go. They'll stay pretty crispy in California. I grew up in Taiwan, so this would not work in Taiwan for more than a day. But you can also store them in your freezer then. But then this becomes your cracker. And think about it, it's literally just flax seeds with a little bit of seasoning. Now, quickly, if you want to stay around and watch, what I would serve this with is a lentil tabbouleh. So lentil tabbouleh, lentils, and I just have to show you, usually like my new favorite. I don't work for any brand, anything, but this is Clear Creek Foods. Just like I'm a big fan of Gordo beans, huge fan of Gordo beans. These lentils are amazing. They're black French lentils. And if you've ever been to the restaurant Cava and had their lentils, this is the type. They cook up individually, so they don't smush together. They're beautiful black, little pearls almost, they look like. And they're great for salad because they stay whole. They don't mush together. So I have them cooked, ready to go. I'm going to use a little bit of parsley. I'm going to get my parsley ready. I'm going to show you how to chop parsley and cilantro, okay? So you can use however much. You can use a little bit more of this, less of this, up to you, okay? Realizing that the flavor of both of these come from the stem. So the more stem you get in, the stronger that flavor will be. So now what will we do to make this easy? Instead of picking each leaf off, we give it a haircut. You pinch the blade, okay? And you hold everything, hold the stems, okay? And then just using your knife, it'll take off the big leaves. Now there's still a little bit left. What do I do with this? Stock. Make like a veggie stock, veggie soup. It'll be a good base. And then I'll go in and I can see the large stems that I might not want, okay? Parsley is dirty too, everyone. Make sure you wash it well. It likes to hang, the dirt likes to hang out in the middle. Dirt sinks. Things like this float. So if you want, go ahead and you can just, there's a big stem. You can soak it in a big pot of water or a big bowl of water. And then let the dirt kind of sink to the bottom, and these guys will float right to the top, and then you can ladle it out. We're just giving it a rough chop. You can put it in a food processor if you want, but what ends up happening is it doesn't kind of get watery, too watery sometimes. Go back in and chop. So again, you can add some cilantro if you want to. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna add my lentils in. I'm gonna add 1 Roma tomato. And so Roma tomatoes, or 2, up to you. But I'm gonna take off one end, and I'm just gonna show you that if you cut through the middle, you'll expose all the seeds, and you can dig out the seeds if you want, and that'll keep the flavor of the tomato pretty mild. I like the flavor of the tomato, so I'm gonna add the whole thing in. But if you wanted to, you can remove it. Take my cookies out. Here are the cookies, which so that you can see they're gorgeous, nice, light and airy. Can you see them? Yes. Okay, I'm gonna come back here and finish this tabbouleh salad. The tabbouleh salad lasts quite a while too, so you can have it in your refrigerator for a good 3 to 4 days, and then just have it as part of your meal. I'm gonna add a Persian cucumber. Take off the ends. You can use any kind of cucumber you want. I like cutting them into sticks, and this is a good way to practice dicing. Claw, and then go back and forth, Okay, and that's it. Something else good in here would be a radish. Radishes would be good. If you don't like onion, try radishes, because radishes have that nice kind of pungent, kind of bright, or like that in your face taste, I guess is the best way to put it. So if you like, you can, instead of adding an onion, you can try a radish. So I'm going to cut the onion in half first and then peel. And if you feel like a red onion is too strong, you can soak it in a little bit of water and it'll help. Take off the end. It's right in the middle. And then if you wanted more onion, you could add more onion too. Now, the only thing that ends up going in here for a dressing is a lemon. This is the only time, I mean, organic produce, yeah, try to buy organic if possible, but especially this, if you're going to be using the outside of a lemon or the outside of a lime, make sure it's organic, because you're literally just shaving like pesticides into your food if it's not. So this is the one time where I'm saying buy organic if you're going to use it. If not, don't use it. Just don't use the zest. I'd rather you stay away from the zest. Then I'm going to take off the ends and show you how to use this juicer correctly. So remember, I know it's tempting to go this way because it looks like it's supposed to, but flip it around and go this way. Ooh, rolled oats, quick oats, and steel cut oats. Ooh, you can use all of them to make the flour. Yes, you can. But the one with the most fiber out of all of those will be your steel cut oats. And then your rolled oats would be the next. And then your quick oats are probably the least. And so the way that you can think about the fiber content of it is how much it's been processed. So it was great. I was reading a article recently about the anti-inflammatory diet and what they suggest as whole grains. And you know what they actually say? They don't actually even, this article didn't even suggest using flour, like whole wheat flour. They only suggested cracked wheats. And the reason is because when you start the milling process, you remove a lot of the stuff, even though it looks brown and it looks like it's whole wheat. It is, but you've milled a lot of it. You've processed a lot of it out. So you just want to be careful when you are using whole grains. They're way better than regular white flour, but it's still been processed and a lot of that fiber might have been removed. All right. Thank you everyone for staying. You could have added some mint in here if you wanted. I'm gonna add a little bit of olive oil just to finish it up. And a little bit of salt and pepper. And then you can enjoy that with the crackers. I think that is it. And Katrina's here, and so thank you guys for stopping by, and we'll see you next month. Bye. Sounds good. Thank you.